Hey guys, welcome back to my YouTube channel. My mic quality is fried as usual, but I've messed with the settings so it might be a little bit better this time. So, today's video, you saw the title, it's going to be about creating mechanics and general world building, things like that, but more so on the side of how do you make sure this mechanic is fully fleshed out? How do you make sure it's three-dimensional? So, similar to my last video about how to make sure your character is fully fleshed out, but for world building mechanics and things like that this time. So, there's going to be 4 steps to this. The first step is the concept. What is it? What does it do? What can it do? It's just very vague, very simple. Second is what does it affect? So, a little more specific. Or who does it affect? Because, say you have a magic system, not everyone might be born with magic. So, then you have to kind of think about that, right? Third is the cultural impact, and this is one that I feel like is pretty interesting to think about. What impact do these mechanics have on the culture of your fictional societies? And fourth, leniency versus rules. And that's going to be more of a, like, how far can you bend the laws of this mechanic? Like, how far can you push it? Things like that. First is the concept, and I'm going to be starting off. I'm going to be using the example of Nexus strikes from my game, Project Lala. Although they're not actually mentioned much in the game, they are a very important part of the world. And I feel like it'd be pretty nice to make a video and actually explain these on my channel for once. So, starting out with the concept, like I just said a few moments ago, what is it? I'm going to have to give a little background on this. This might end up being sped up because it is a lot. So, essentially, Project Lala takes place on a planet called Connect, right? Thousands, millions, however many years, I haven't figured that out yet, ago, humans were brought to this planet. And obviously, humans are from Earth, not this planet. So over time, they evolved and adapted to become species of their own called Lexley. And part of what helped them adapt, like, quicker than you would expect for, like, because I know early humans were far, far long ago compared to modern humans. But humans like 3,000 years ago were probably not that far away from humans now, comparatively. So there's an energy from the planet that helped speed up this adaptation, this evolution, which they kind of needed it. I don't know how much longer those humans would have lasted. That's another thing. So, so Nexus strikes are a result of the energy from the planet adapting these humans over time and eventually allowing them to harness that energy themselves in a sort of way. And Nexus strikes, they kind of affect the properties of some things of the characters. So like their quote unquote hair, I don't know if I'm gonna rename hair to something different, but I'm just gonna say hair for now. It does not follow the properties of human hair anymore. It is more likely to be multiple bigger objects rather than thousands and thousands of tiny strands. Um, that's why some of it wouldn't translate perfectly to real life. Like Jay's hair, you could say that it could be like wicks in real life, but in the game, they're not wicks because it's not individual strands of hair. It's just those strands of hair are just what they have. It's, I believe, 8 or 10. Yeah, no, 10 giant, whatever you want to call those. And because of Jay's Nexus Strike, they can be cut and sort of styled in a similar way to hair. But the Nexus Strike is essentially what defines these properties. So what color it is, um, what shape it takes, whether it can be cut, whether it can be manipulated or styled, things like that. So another example, like, um, take Nectarine and Saffron. Their family been has some suspicious ties to a certain cult that likes to pride themselves on like not adapting and staying away, staying closer to humanity. So their hair is technically not still their hair is still not strands of human hair, but the sections are a lot smaller because they are less adapted. They have not, or rather, they're less evolved comparatively because of their lineage. So that's why they look a lot more normal. Their hair can also be cut and styled a little easier. But then that also brings me to the actual structure of Nexus Strikes. It's a primary and a secondary. Like going back to Jay's is Topax Ombre, I believe. Topax being the primary is what makes it orange and also gives it the shape. and then the ombre is just what makes the ends fade into blue, essentially. And then other parts of it are determined mostly just by genetics. Not all of it is going to be like, not everyone with the same nexus trait is going to look the exact same. They're not going to have the exact same hair. All that to say, when you're trying to make sure a mechanic is fleshed out, you kind of have to have an explanation like that. That still took up longer than I wanted it to, so I'll probably end up speeding it up a little bit. Okay, so we're gonna move on now to part two, and that is what does it affect, or who does it affect? When you're creating this, when you're trying to make sure your concept works, you obviously got to know what and who it affects. So in the case of a Nexus strike, it affects basically everyone except for a select few people. Like it affects everyone to some extent now, most likely, except for those select few, obviously, cult members that do everything they can to not have one, which is kind of stupid. Um, and then what does it affect? That's a lot broader and it's a lot harder to define. But as long as you can name like a good list of, or rather, name what it, if it affects most everything, you should be able to name what it doesn't affect. And if it doesn't affect very much, you should be able to name what it does affect. So a Nexus strike affects it can affect your ability to fight too, because it affects your ability to use the energy from the planet that was imbued in you when you were spawned in, I suppose. So it could impact your ability to fight. It could impact your ability, your athleticism. It could impact your intelligence. It could impact any number of things. It cannot really affect your appearance in ways other than like the color of your hair and fingertips and maybe your eyes. I still haven't decided if I want their eyes to be like affected directly by that or not. So there's that. And I'm going to give a different example just to make it a little clearer. Let's say you have a magic system, right? Like I said in the beginning, you could say that in this world, there's magic in every living thing, like kind of like Dragon Prince. I don't know who's watched that here. Probably no one's watching my channel, let's be quite honest. I don't have anyone watching my channel. So in Dragon Prince, essentially the land Zadia or whatever, basically everything's magical. And so humans, when they use dark magic, they have to take things from Zadia, living things, and use their magic by like killing them basically. So that's not very good. That's another example. You'd say that it could be a part of all living things and therefore affects everything. Or it could be something completely different, whereas like this is a very specific mechanic that affects like only this specific region of the world, or only this specific realm. So that's just a good question, I think, for defining the scope of it, how much you can really like affect. That's pretty much it for that part. On to part three. And part three is the cultural impact. And this is what I think is the most interesting to play around with. And that is because, well, first of all, it depends on how long your mechanic has been a part of the world. Because if had set my story far in the past, to like the very beginning, there would be no Nexus strikes. Or in the early days of them, how the culture viewed it would be a whole lot different than how it views them nowadays, whereas almost everyone has one. So if your mechanic has been around long enough to affect the culture, or rather, if it's suddenly being introduced, then what effect does it have on the culture, or just the people in general, I guess? Because for Nexus strikes in my world, right? There's a bunch of new sports that have been like essentially split into multiple different ones based on whether you're allowed to use your Nexus strike or not, or like how big of a component it is in the game. The biggest sport in Connect is Blitzball, and it is essentially you have to use your Nexus strike, otherwise you can't really play the game. It's very interesting. I'm not gonna explain it all here because I've already wasted too much time explaining my mechanics. Maybe I'll make a video on that at some point. But that sport obviously could not be possible without Nexus strikes. So in that way, Nexus strikes have created a whole new sport and a whole new culture kind of around that. Because from Blitzball came Street Blitz. Because for Blitzball, you need a proper arena, you need proper gear and all that. But in this city, the quote unquote ghetto city, 1M, they don't have all that most of the time. Like if you're a teenager and this is your favorite sport, you won't always have somewhere to practice because they don't have the best facilities. So Street Blitz is a new form of that, even that still. that kind of became a subculture in that world. The people were basically found ways to play and substitute things in without the right arena and without the right gear. So, and with any subculture, there's often a fashion style that becomes associated with it, sometimes a music style, even. Like, obviously, this is activity based, so it already has the activity being Street Blitz. But that's just one of the impacts that it had. Because obviously, like I said, without Nexus Strikes, no Blitzball, no Street Blitz, no subculture. So that's one of the other things that I think is kind of fun to consider how much it impacts the culture. Because, like, if you had like a magic system, I'm sorry, this can be used for a lot more than magic systems, but that's like the easiest example I can think of off the top of my head. This is unscripted if I didn't mention that already. Um, let's say magic is like something that you only use in cooking. How you could think about what kinds of foods are preferred, what kinds of foods are considered quick and easy, and like what new kinds of foods are created as a result of that. Like simple things like that. Or even like how do restaurants work anymore if magic makes it so easy to cook foods? Like is there even a point? Is there now a situation where food cooked without magic is like a delicacy or a luxury? Like it's very interesting to think about, I feel like, and it helps give a lot more depth to your mechanic or your world building or whatever. So now I'm on to the final part, which should be pretty short, hopefully, because the video is already going to be way too long. Part four being leniency versus rules. How strict of a system do you want this to be? And this really depends entirely on the concept. With something like a magic system or like an energy system, it could be a whole lot more lenient on what you could possibly use it for compared to something specific like Nexus Strikes, which only affects like certain aspects of yourself. Well, I'd actually put Nexus Strikes kind of in the middle because obviously there are rules, like it doesn't really affect you in too many ways, but you're still using energy from the planet at the end of the day, so that creates a little bit of leniency for how much you can really affect with that. But like take like the energy concept. If your mechanic is simply like an energy that exists in certain things, that's just kind of like a potential energy or like a specific kind of energy like fire magic or whatever, then there's a lot of things you can use with fire and do with fire, or with, especially with just like a potential energy that can just be used to do things in general. That's a whole lot more lenient versus a very strict spell casting system, whereas like you have to use these words in these languages and this certain like amount of these words to create a spell. Um, and then to actually be able to cast a spell, you have to have this, and this. So kind of got to consider how open-ended this is. Um, because I feel like there's obviously a place for both. Like with Nexus Strikes, there is kind of a rule element, as in like there's not just infinite Nexus Strike combinations. There's still kind of a fixed amount. There are a ton of combinations, sure, just like there are a ton of primaries and secondaries, but you still just can't have like anything. It can't just be whatever. Like there's still you still kind of have to start somewhere. So yeah, that's really kind of it. It's just think about how strict these rules are. Like, can you do this and can you not do this? I don't really know how to wrap up this section, so I'm just gonna end it there. So to summarize, got your concept, which you probably already do if you came here, or at least the beginnings of the concept. You know what it is. So then you figure out what does it affect? Who does it affect? What about them does it affect? Then you figure out the cultural impact. How has this mechanic shaped the cultures of these fictional societies? And then fourth, how lenient versus how strict is the system? Are there always a specific set of things you can do and can't do? Or is it sort of just a potential that could be used for pretty much anything within reason? That's pretty much it. So if you actually made it this far, that's amazing. It's pretty fire. You should probably subscribe if you made it this far, unless you're already subscribed. And then you should comment. So I feel like I didn't just throw this out into the void for no reason at all. Yeah, so like, thank you for watching. Have a good day. Good luck on your mechanics and stories and world building, actually comment it, please. Please do tell me about your story and world building if you feel like it. I think that'd be pretty cool. Like and subscribe, please, so I can pay for college. Have a nice day. Goodbye. I don't know. Um, don't let the bed bugs bite. Yeah, no, we're just gonna end it.